Now, when you walk into a newly acquired environment, what tells you within the first 2 weeks whether this will be a disciplined integration or a painful one?
Right. There are a couple of things they kind of look at. You obviously want to see the people first. You want to see what the culture's like, what their decision rights are when they're making decisions for the velocity of the company. You need to look at the platforms that they're running. What are they using to make the company operate? If there's fragmentation, is there shadow IT? Is it stable? You see many different flavors when you go into many different companies. So that's always an indicator of how things are going to go.
Now, we're talking about if you had to explain technology's role in protecting valuation and managing risk to a board in one sentence, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would basically frame that, technology drives valuation by reducing variance. It helps to accelerate integration and helps de-risk operations and allows companies to grow and scale when used properly.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Leaders Lounge by Quantum Dialogues, where we sit down with senior technology leaders to talk about what actually works in modernization, integration, and execution. No buzzwords, just real talk. Today, I'm joined by John Trchala, a senior technology leader with more than 2 decades of experience leading post-acquisition integration, modernization, cloud transformation, and AI initiatives across highly regulated and private equity-backed environments. John has stepped into complex environments where speed, risk, and valuation all collide. That's where this conversation lives. We'll also be joined later by Nilesh Mehta, CEO of NGenious Solutions and author of Reinventing IT Operations, who will add an operator lens to the discussion. John, thank you for being here. Let's start with you. When you look back at your career, what shaped your operating style the most? Was
Sure.
there a specific moment or experience that changed how you led integration and modernization?
Sure. So I basically started out in a consulting basis, working with a lot of the Fortune 1000 companies, implementing software, enterprise portal software, and got to learn about a lot of different IT shops in very short order, which was a great experience. I was brought into a PE-backed environment, a few years into it, and was asked to help modernize some legacy applications and stuff like that. Was successful in that, was successful in some acquisitions that we did. And, as part of that, kind of having my feet to the fire, I developed an operator mindset, how to help grow and scale a company, which I've used in other jobs within my career. For over the past 20 years, I've been working with a lot of other private equity firms, building companies, growing, scaling, and doing a lot of M&A integration.
That's great. Thanks for that insight. Now, when you walk into a newly acquired environment, what tells you within the first 2 weeks whether this will be a disciplined integration or a painful one?
Right. There are a couple of things they kind of look at. You obviously want to see the people first. You want to see what the culture's like, what their decision rights are when they're making decisions for the velocity of the company. You need to look at the platforms that they're running. What are they using to make the company operate? If there's fragmentation, is there shadow IT? Is it stable? You see many different flavors when you go into many different companies. So that's always an indicator of how things are going to go. You also want to understand what processes they have, how the business operates. People like to focus on, quote to cash, but there's also other processes in the background, how they fulfill whatever products or services they do. And is it scalable? And then finally, I like to take a look from a security and risk perspective, what the company has in play, what are their commitments? Do they do things like backups? Are there other single points of failure? Are there people that are critical to the organization that are potentially in flight or could be in flight? So you need to come up with your risk list up very soon.
Sounds like there's a lot to look at there. So when you go in there after the first 30 days after a deal closes, what are the 2 or 3 technology decisions that prevent drift and expensive rework later?
Sure. You really need to establish, your single source of truth. How is the company operating? What is the level of integration posture that you're going to need to have? Are you going to basically go onto your common platform that you have with your existing company? Are you going to be sunsetting some applications? Are you going to, tolerate some things that might be different, but it's unique enough to keep the business running? So you need to kind of, be careful about that. You obviously don't want to break the business. And then you just want to identify the operating cadence. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to make decisions, and you're going to need people to be accountable for those decisions. So locking in who's responsible for what decision and having clarity on that.
Okay, John, great response to that last question. Next question here. In post-merger integrations, where do experienced leaders still underestimate complexity? Is it systems, data identity, operating model, culture, or is there something else?
I think, first, that's a good question. I think one of the things that are a bit misunderstood is, people treat PMI as technology only. You're really looking at the organization, you're looking at all the processes, and you're building your operating model, your go-to operating model, what you're going to evolve into. There's a lot of things that go into building that, and it's very important to have that defined properly, because that's how all the technology and all the other things that fall into place. So having that is key.
Interesting. Now, one of the things that I think is sometimes not thought about a lot is technical debt discipline, right? So, modernization sounds pretty clean when you kind of go through it in the slide deck, but in reality, I think we all know it's messy.
Yeah.
How do you decide what technical debt to tolerate temporarily versus what to retire immediately?
Yeah, well, the technical debt that I would really attack at first is any kind of debt that creates drag to the organization, that slows it down or creates risk to the organization. These are things that you really need to be careful about. You might have an organization that is running an ERP that was mainframe based, and the guy's about to retire. So it makes us more keen on finding a scalable replacement instead of having this legacy application in the past. There's some technical debt that you can tolerate. There might be that one report that always was around that is tough to regenerate and everything like that. So it's not like you're sweeping everything out, but you just need to kind of keep track of it and sequence the different things that you're going to be replacing, and hopefully come up with a better end result for the organization.
So when we're talking about technical debt, do you have a particular principle or approach that you take when you're sequencing this?
Sure. So you want to make sure that you're helping the company grow and scale. Obviously, you want to remove any types of risk or things that would allow the company to take a step backwards or break the company. You don't want to do that, obviously. And you just want to obviously protect revenue, because that's the big thing, and the operations. So anything that would interfere with that, you obviously want to attack first.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, it took us a long time probably to even get to this buzzword, right? AI, right? So when we talk about regulated environments, AI governance can either enable execution or slow everything down. So what guardrails actually work in practice, and which ones are just paperwork?
Yeah, I think governance is very important in the whole AI arena. Having proper governance that helps the organization through guardrails, as you mentioned, not just creating an AI document and say that's what we're doing and just living with that. The proper guardrails include things like clean data, model transparency, the proper oversight by a human being, because AI is great, but you still need adults in the room, so to speak, to kind of make sure that the AI is doing the right thing, and proper approvals too, because a lot of things, especially in the agentic areas, that it's doing things automatically, but you still need to have proper approvals and things in place to make sure that you're handling the data in appropriate ways. And again, we try to, at the end of the day, regulate outcomes, not just the technology that is handling that. So again, long-winded answer, but AI governance is key to any kind of AI initiative.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Those are great points. Absolutely things that need to be considered. Now, we talk about if you had to explain technology's role in protecting valuation and managing risk to a board in one sentence, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would basically frame that, technology drives valuation by reducing variance. It helps to accelerate integration and helps de-risk operations and allows companies to grow and scale when used properly.
Great, great. Now we're going to do a little bit rapid fire, right? So let's shift gears. Short answers, instinctive responses. You're not allowed to think about it too much. Okay. Um, One transformation buzzword you would retire forever.
Turnkey solution. This day and age, not everything is turnkey, and there's always dependencies and complexities.
The most common post-merger integration mistake, 5 words or less.
Integrating before defining the model. You got to know who you are before you integrate.
Your non-negotiable metric in the first 30 days post-deal.
Similarly, identity accuracy. You want to know what you're building.
AI governance, guardrails or handrails. Why?
I still call them handrails. I mean, you need guidance. You don't need barriers, but you need to know how you're going to handle your data and what you're going to do with it.
Azure or AWS, what actually decides which one you select?
I think Azure is great for enterprise alignment. Microsoft's got a big footprint within the enterprise. I think AWS for maybe specialized workloads or things that would require something that would run better in the AWS stack. A lot of times the business model is going to decide what gets used.
Great. Last one. If you could give yourself your younger self, one career instruction, what would it be?
Slow down long enough to understand the problem that you're trying to solve before you solve it, because that's going to really help you frame the proper solution.
That's great advice. I think all of our younger selves and even our current selves should take that into consideration. So John, thank you. That was sharp and very practical. I want to bring Nilesh now to push this from an operational execution standpoint. Nilesh works closely with CIOs and operators on modernization programs and is gathering insights for his upcoming book. Let's pressure test some of this from the operator lens. Nilesh, all yours.
Thank you so much, Andres. John, thank you for the amazing insights. I think it is awesome to hear your experience about how you've been working on integration modernization especially in your PE-based acquisitions over there. I'm definitely going to be interested in talking about that a little bit more over here. Just as a background, as Andres mentioned, my name is Nilesh Mehta. I'm the CEO founder at NGenious Solutions. Pretty much like yourself, I come with about 25 years of background in the world of technology, especially in the areas of Microsoft and service-oriented solutions like ServiceNow and ERP implementations. That's kind of my focus over there. As a background, what I'm trying to do is bring my experience into writing. So hopefully that can help other people with some benefits on their operations management. And that's where what I'm doing is also talking to other technology leaders like yourself to see, what has been your experience over the last couple of decades. What would you like to share to other organizations, whether small or mid-sized organizations, and see how they can benefit from our collective learnings over there, right? So as Andres mentioned, my focus is specifically around reinventing IT operations, right? Over the last couple of decades, we've seen a huge growth from on-prem servers to the cloud, now AI-based implementations. And every time a major shift like that occurs, it impacts how we manage our operations on a day-to-day basis, right? And I'm hoping that we can, collectively build a kind of like a manifest that we can go back and say, well, you know what, this is what the big guys or the enterprises do. But you know what, maybe the SMBs and the mid-size can take benefit from it or this also, and they don't know how to do everything, but maybe they can take snippets and take advantage of the learnings from that perspective. So that's kind of my goal right now. But coming back to you over here, Love to build on some of the points that you focused on. I guess, over the last couple of years, we've also done quite a few projects that were either splits across companies or merging together, right? And I think Anders did, ask one of these questions that was kind of related, but where do you see the biggest gap between executive expectations and operational realities when you're doing an acquisition of some sort then?
The biggest gap probably is complexity. Sometimes people just say, "Oh, we need to consolidate these systems and or put this ERP out, and that's it." And it should take 2 months for that. Whereas when you look under the hood, there could be things like unnormalized data, fragmented data, incomplete data, operations and processes that are just not transferable to a new modern platform. So it's the underlying complexities of the actual migration, consolidation, whatever you're doing.
I'm going to make this an interactive session, John, just so I think because I have viewpoints that I would like to bring up for you over there.
Sure.
When you're doing these acquisitions and we've worked with some of them, we recently ran into a scenario where there's a company that's going to split, but they didn't realize the effort it would take to actually split the technology behind it and the cost it would incur from doing that perspective, right? Do you, in your experience, get an opportunity to look at the technical landscape of the organization that you're potentially going to acquire before you have to jump into that engagement, or does it always happen after the fact for you? Like, do you have time to plan for it upfront?
I'd prefer to, especially if you're part of an organization like I have been in the past, where they did a lot of M&A work and everything like that. So it's not like you're involved up front when you're just doing introductions, but usually before a deal gets signed, I would be brought in to do the due diligence from an IT perspective, because it's also very important, when you're doing a deal to understand that, because you got to figure out what is going to cost to integrate,
Exactly.
What is it going to cost from a licensing perspective, are there any gotchas, and that might affect the deal. I was on one deal where they were talking about ERP, but it was 6 SAP systems that were legacy systems that had to be modernized and consolidated. That's a lot of money. So you need to kind of reflect that into the deal. So being involved before the deal closes is very important. I've also been involved with deals where something closed and it's like, okay, let's make this work. So it's it's a different scenario at that point.
Yeah, and generally with acquisitions, like you have limited times to get
Yep.
things done, right? In some ways, and when you have systems like this, that could take months into years sometimes, right?
Yep.
Depending on how things go. So all of that needs to be factored in when you're going through a scenario like that over there. Right? So that's great insight over there. My next question is, what is that one discipline or one strict methodology that you follow that can create a major impact in the first 90 days after an acquisition, whether it's governance cadence, visibility into services, making the right decisions, something like that. So what would you say is that one major thing that you will focus on that will have a big impact for you?
I think one of the biggest things, not even a technology thing, it's clarity. Being able to work with your new organization that you're working with, define who does what when, and make sure that there's no assumptions. You just need to know these are the players, this is what we're doing, and this is what's going to happen. If you give clarity to people, it's going to go a lot smoother.
I like that idea. I think this is something that should not happen only during acquisitions, but even when we do major enterprise implementation like you've done before, it's all about communicating properly on what we are going to do, which can make all end users comfortable, because it's not just about technical debt and the liability stuff like that, but we also have actual end users who are leveraging the system on a day in and day out basis. And the more we communicate to them on what we are going to make changes from a technical landscape perspective, they know it's coming and they can be mentally prepared from it and start planning at a departmental, at a team level to say, well, this is coming and this is how we do change processes to adapt to what the new world is going to look like from that perspective, right? So I think that is a great point you bring over here. Communication is obviously one of the greatest keys to success over there.
Sure.
My last question, I guess, from my point of view will be, like you said, there's a lot of money involved and there's timeline involved, right? How do you balance speed and standardization without creating that resistance from the teams that you're going to acquire, right? It's like, I need to get this done in the next 2 months. And they're like, well, took us 2 years to implement that. How are you going to do that in 2 months over here, right? So how do you get that speed? Because that's very essential for you after an acquisition over there.
Yeah, I think to get to speed, you really need to get executive support. And to your point, you might have some users or groups of people that you're working with that would be hesitant to move or whatever. And having the proper support from the executive saying, yes, this is different. Yes, we're moving in this direction, and we're not stopping, helps me because we're trying to drive that fast change, everything like that. And having that support and having that message that we are going in this direction is key.
In a situation like this, it would really be helpful if you had the technical landscape knowledge in advance, right? That way you could communicate, plan better, because you definitely need that time to do that. So as much as time is available there. Amazing insights. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time over here and the questions. Unless that's the last one from me. So I guess back to you.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, John. That was great discussion points there. John, final question for you. In the next 2 to 3 years, we all understand that AI will have a major impact on enterprise transformation. What should leaders do now to prepare for that?
It's a great question. And you're right, AI is going to be very transformational for every organization. And those that aren't embracing it are going to be left behind. I think businesses really need to think about how they frame AI in their processes. It's no longer just like a project that IT does. It's going to be changing the continuous operating model of an organization. So they need to know that the way that they operate is going to change, and you're going to be using AI and automation, all that kind of fun stuff to do so. So I think we need to advise leaders to build organizations that can adapt in real time. Things like making decisions, data, platforms built for this is all going to be constantly changing, and it's having the discipline and always learning because everything changes.
Great. So John, if I were to summarize this conversation in one line, which is difficult because you shed a lot of great insights here, it's that modernization after acquisition is not about the tools at all, right? It's about disciplined decision, sequencing, and making informed decisions in the first 30 to 90 days. Thank you for sharing your experience so candidly. Nilesh, thank you for your operator perspective. To everyone watching this was the Leaders Lounge by Quantum Dialogues. If this conversation resonated, follow along for more discussions with CIOs and CTOs navigating real-world transformation. We'll see you in the next episode.